we start with breaking news, and a manslaughter investigation's been opened into the death of Mike Lynch and 6 others after a luxury yacht sank off the coast of Sicily. Well, a little earlier, the Italian prosecutor Ambrogio Cartosio outlines the current situation.
I would like to officially communicate to you that the prosecutor of the Termini Imerese has hypothesised that there could be, in fact, a question of manslaughter. But this is just, in fact, the beginning of the inquiry. Generally, a prosecutor is never satisfied to give this information at this stage, precisely because, in fact, the developments, as far as the inquiry are concerned, could in fact change. We cannot exclude anything.
Well, Sky's Ashna Harinag was in that press conference in Porticello this morning. And Ashna, quite a bit for us to discuss this morning. Let's start with that extraordinary search and rescue operation that turned, sadly, into a recovery operation. They went into quite a lot of detail of the 70 people involved and the divers that went down to the yacht.
They did, that's right, Summer. Over the course of an hour and a half, it was a very long press conference, and to some 100 journalists that were in the room and dozens of cameras as the world's media descended on this courthouse. I'm currently in a small town just outside of the capital of Sicily in Palermo, or just outside of Palermo, about 11 miles from where that shipwreck is still lying on the seabed. And you're right, we learned a lot about the operation that the Coast Guard and also the search and rescue teams conducted over the course of the 5 days that they have been searching. We heard first about a timeline of events. We heard that the call initially came in at 4:32 on Monday morning. We know that there was extreme weather that day, quite severe bad weather. The body of the chef on board was discovered almost immediately. 4 further bodies were then found on Wednesday. They were that of Mr. and Mrs. Bloomer and Mr. and Mrs. Morvillo, friends of Mike Lynch. His body was then discovered later in the day on Wednesday. And then yesterday, the Coast Guard and the divers found the body of the 18-year-old daughter of Mike Lynch, Hannah Lynch. They said that moment for them was particularly difficult for everybody involved, given that she was such a young girl. He thanked the rescue teams that were involved, and he spoke a lot more about the divers themselves, the search and rescue representatives here, telling the world's media that there were 11 highly specialised divers involved in the operation. There were 20 divers in total. We know that divers from right across Italy were involved in this operation. They were working, as we know and have been learning, in extremely confined, restricted spaces. They conducted 123 dives over the course of those 4 or 5 days, made up of teams of 2 at a time in total. And divers, people watching who have been underwater or people who have been in this industry will know that they were underneath that water for a very long time, in total of 4,470 minutes in total. We knew that those were in short windows at a time because it took 2 minutes to get to the seabed, to the shipwreck itself. They spent 4 minutes or up to 8 minutes underneath there, and then they had to come back up because they were working in such restrictive circumstances. They said by yesterday there was very little visibility. They also finally just talked about where the bodies on board were discovered. They found all of the bodies in the upper part of the yacht. They said that suggested that perhaps those on board had tried to run away, or that they had been sleeping, given that this was in the very early hours of Monday morning. The boat itself was lying on its side. It was made up of 6 cabins in total where passengers or the tourists had been staying. There were 3 cabins on the left-hand side, 3 on the right. They said that the first bodies were found in the first cabin on the left-hand side, and the body of 18-year-old Hannah was found in the last cabin, last of the 3 cabins. And we also found out today that the search and rescue teams are yet to find the black box, which they believe could hold further information to aid their investigation.
Extraordinary details there, and incredibly sad as well as quite a mystery. Let's talk about the investigation further, Ashna, and of course manslaughter investigation launched, and a reminder that they are very much in the preliminary stages, including not having conducted post-mortem examinations.
That's right. This press conference was led and headed up by the head of the public prosecutor here in this local authority. His name, Ambrogio Cartosio, and he stressed that this was the very early stages of their investigation. How these complex cases work is they first start by assessing and analysing whether manslaughter could be considered and whether shipwreck investigations should also commence at the same time. He confirmed that was indeed happening, but he did say that he was in the very early stages gathering evidence, gathering testimony, including from the 15 survivors of this incident, among them the captain of the vessel. Now, I asked him in some broken Italian, it has to be said, that the captain was the captain and the crew on board, were they cooperating with the line of questioning, to which immediately the spokesperson on behalf of the prosecutor said they were being very cooperative. He did say there was no obligation for those on board this vessel to stay in Italy, but that he trusted that they were going to continue to answer their questions and aid their investigation. He also said finally that the investigation would be broad, it would take a very long time, and he said this is likely to be the only time up until they reach some sort of conclusion to their investigation that they will speak publicly. And just behind them, behind those speakers, we saw representatives, probably about between 20 to 40 individuals representing different organisations who are involved in this operation, standing shoulder to shoulder. And we heard, as I say, from representatives of the Coast Guard, of the Fire and Rescue Service, and from those prosecutors inside. But just to remind viewers that prosecutors here are considering manslaughter and shipwreck as plausible charges to consider, and he said his job ultimately is to find who is responsible.